See? You know, the idea of evolution, and we started up with no language. No. When Elohim created Adam, Adam was able to have conversation. He taught Adam how to speak. So much so, Adam named the animals. If we believe what Holy Scripture teaches, he named them. Scripture said that the Most High brought these animals to Adam to see what he would name them. That means that he had to have an understanding of whatever language he was taught. Now, we refer to that language today as Hebrew or Hebrew. Okay? People may want to argue, people may want to debate that. We touched on that in another broadcast. But debate aside, that's the language that was being spoken. Now, the other point is, the reason behind the language being confused, people wouldn't even think about it in this context. This was another sign of Abba's grace, his mercy, and his compassion. So you may ask the question, well, how is that? Where do you get that from? What they were about to do would have brought destruction upon them. When he confused the language, now let me say this. Because what people are going to do, they're going to look at all the languages we have today, and they're going to think that he confused them into all the languages we have today. No. He confused them into the languages of the people during that time. Okay? Now, just like I was given with the example of English. English is what it is. You have what's called the King's English, you know. But then, within the English language, there are sub-languages. And that's what took place. You know, you had the basic languages that they were divided into, but then as a result, you had sub-languages that also developed. Matter of fact, here's an example of something that became a sub-language that's in the dictionary now. Now, when I was younger, when I was in school, we were always taught not to say ain't. We said it anyway. You know, I guess they attribute it to being Ebonics or what have you, but we used to say ain't. Instead of saying I am not, we made a contraction of it and said I ain't. But that word is now in the dictionary. And my point in mentioning that, it became a sub-language, you know, developed from different people how they talk. And that's where the multitude of languages began to increase. But even with that, spiritually speaking, prophetically speaking, we're supposed to learn something. Because see, that one language and that one speak, you know what that also points to? Abba's word. Just like Abba has one word. See? Abba has one word. But because of humanity, okay, with their varied opinions, with their speculative thought, with their logic and their reasoning, now you have a whole bunch of religions. You have a whole bunch of spiritualities. You have a whole bunch of sciences. You have a whole bunch of philosophies. Man did that. Okay? But anyway, let's get back to our point. The reason why the language was confused was to forestall the destruction that humanity was going to bring on themselves. Now it spread it out. It gave us the time that Abba allotted for us. When we go to this, he says, picking up in verse 8. Matter of fact, verse 7. Come, let's go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So Yahweh scattered them abroad from there on the surface of all the earth. They stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there Yahweh confused the language of all the earth. From there Yahweh scattered them abroad on the surface of all the earth. So now you have the different people that are speaking the different languages, but guess what they all had? They had the knowledge of the creator of the heavens and the earth. Okay? So now, as a result, going right back to how opinionated we are. Going right back to the idea of that speculative thought, that logic, that reasoning. What do you think happened as far as humanity? Now this is something that happened beforehand, and we're going to see a passage that deals with that as well. But when the flood waters came and cleansed the earth of all the wickedness that existed prior, Noah, his sons, Noah's wife, their wives, they had the truth. But even still, that old serpent was able to get involved. You know why? Because we are still carnally minded. They brought the truth over after the flood too. But guess what else they brought over? Human nature. That didn't die. That's why when they had their children, guess what? They have human nature. And remember, that's what we're talking about. That's what kicked this whole discussion off. What is sin? Human nature is sinful nature. What is deception? Human nature is deceptive nature. Okay? Keep these things in mind. So as each generation passes, guess what? That human nature that had that experience with the Most High, knowing beyond a shadow of doubt that the Creator of the heavens and the earth is real, guess what? The next generation didn't have that same experience. And the next generation moved further away. And then the next generation, and look at us today. Okay? This is what happened. All right? But let's get back to the thought. Now, although Babel was the first kingdom that was established, right? Babylonian Empire would not become a world ruling empire until King Nebuchadnezzar. All right? But it still had a part to play in the development of society during that time. And it had an impact and an influence. Because when you look at the world today, people like to look back at Egypt this, Egypt that, and then, rightfully so, they look back at Egypt because Egypt became a world ruling power before the Babylonians did. Interesting enough, right? But what we also find when it comes to mythologies, a lot of these things was rooted in what was going on among the Babylonians, which spread to the Egyptians, which spread to the Assyrians, etc. Okay? Now, all of this taking place in the history of humanity, and I will willing we get into a more in-depth teaching about the histories of humanities and look at a few things and see how some stuff had developed. But all of that is being said because we're still talking about this woman, the love of Sophia. And now it's taking us here to Revelations, or Chazon, chapter 17, right? So we wanted to start, we wanted to look at Zechariah and see that there was this woman, and that the angel referred to this woman, this is wickedness. And there was a base or a house built for her in the land of Shinar. And we went back and we used as a reference point Nimrod. Okay? Matter of fact, let's do this real quick with Nimrod. Real quick. I'm going to keep it in English so that you understand. Something about his name, right? Now, if I was to write this in Hebrew, right, this letter is the Nun. But then there's another word here in the Hebrew language, which is Marad, Mem Resh Dalet. That means the word Marad in Hebrew, it means rebellion. Or I'm just going to put rebel. Now again, an idea again, because he withstood the Most High. But that Nun, because it's the seed, represents continuation. Or continued. So when you look at the name Nimrod, you're talking about a continued rebel. Rebellion. Okay? Consider that. Because that's the impact that Nimrod had. Remember what we read from Josephus about him. Okay. Now, all of that taking place, we wanted to look at that history because this was the foundation of Babel. Now, we're looking at this woman in Revelation chapter 17, right? Starting in verse 1. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters." Now we're looking at it in the context of the woman, and let me go back again. I just like to be repetitive because I want everybody to get this. We're talking about this woman because we're making a connection with Sophia. Okay, we wanted to go back and look at what took place with Babylon, with the confusion of the languages and everything, because when you look at the mythologies, gods and goddesses, there are equivalents in every country. You know, matter of fact, since we're looking at the Greco-Roman aspect of it now, when you get into Revelation. So when you look at the Greco-Roman aspect, what the Greeks refer to as Zeus, the Romans refer to as Jupiter. It's the very same entity. Okay, so that's, you'll find that the similarities across all the mythologies. Sophia is no different. Matter of fact, when you look at all of the gods and goddesses, all of the gods can be compiled into just the one god, and all of the goddesses can be compiled into just the one goddess. Keep these things in mind. All right? So now, verse 1, Revelation chapter 17. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute, who sits on many waters, right? With whom the kings of the earth committed sexual immorality, and those who dwell in the earth were made drunken with the wine of her sexual immorality, or her fornication. He carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast, full of blasphemous names. Think about that. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, right? Now, if you do a study on Revelation chapter 12 and Revelation chapter 13, you'll see who this beast is. Revelation, again, 17:4. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of the sexual immorality of the earth. Now, this next verse is going to tie things together for us. And keep in mind, what are we talking about? We're talking about this woman. Right now, the name we're looking at attached to this woman is Sophia. Wisdom. But listen to what the name is here. And on her forehead, a name was written. Mystery. That's number 1. The fact that it says mystery, what it implies, something is concealed. Everybody doesn't know about it. Okay? When something is concealed, think about what deception means. That you believe something to be true that in actuality is not true. He says, Babylon the Great. Why is that name attached? Because after the flood, this was the result of humanity having these scattered thoughts. And as a manifestation of the scattered thoughts, guess what happened? The Creator confounded the language and then scattered them all over the world. And it's funny because they wanted to build this tower and things like that to prevent being scattered, but in actuality, it caused it. Think about that. Because what took place with us, what takes place with humanity, it starts off here. Take anything. Before a man or a woman puts forth their hand to do anything, it starts right there. They get the thought. They think of it. So the idea of building this tower in defiance of the Most High, the idea that if they didn't build it, they would be scattered all over the place. It started as an idea, but as a manifestation of that, the Creator took attention, paid attention. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to intervene now. Okay? Let's move on. He says, mystery, Babylon the Great. Here's the mother, meaning offspring. Okay? So this is why it's important that we looked at what Zechariah said. This is why it's important that we saw what took place with Nimrod. The mother of the prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. In other words, there was a starting point. It wasn't Egypt, it was Babylon. It was Babylon that infected Mitzrayim, Phut, Canaan, okay? Even the sons of Yafet. Because when you look at the northern religion, think about, for example, the days of the week. We talked about that before. Sunday is basically the day of the sun. Monday, the day of the moon. Tuesday, guess what? That's a goddess, a false goddess of the Nordic practices, Nordic mythologies. Wednesday, Woden's Day. Thursday, Thor's Day. Friday, Frigg's Day. Saturday, Saturn's Day. See? Hold up, brother. No, I'm not even going to get into that. But some people, just because they called the seventh day of the week Saturn's Day, they associate it with that pagan deity. No, 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 no. The seventh day is the seventh day. Just because somebody put a name over it does not change it from being the Sabbath day. Because when you look at different languages, again, here's another proof how the languages was confused. But nevertheless, Shabbat remains Shabbat. Do a study on what different languages refer to as the seventh day or Saturday as. And you'll hear the similarity to the term Shabbat. That is proof positive that the Sabbath day was acknowledged as the day of rest. But let's move on. Again, this woman was called Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of the prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Now, the reason why we wanted to go there is because we're talking about Sophia. I didn't even write it up on the board. Sophia. Because when it comes to philosophy, Philosophia, the love of Sophia. Now, when we look at it from that context, don't just limit it to just being wisdom. Now we got to broaden our horizons and we got to look at what Holy Scripture has been teaching about this woman. This is not bashing women. This is talking about a particular woman who was, the Scriptures just defined, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now from this point, what we want to do, we want to segue to the final part of it, which is another good news. Another good news. Because there were three things that Brother Shaw would say. If he that comes talks about another Messiah, basically, you receive another spirit or another good news. Now the word good news comes from, it's the word gospel initially. It's a Middle English term from Old English, Godspell. Godspell. Okay? And the word God meaning good, and of course spell meaning news. So good news. Alright? Now, of course, the word in Greek, which we have up on the board, number 2098, it is translated as bringing good news. And then if you look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, you'll find this very same word used, and it's in place of the term in Hebrew, number 1309, besorah, which means a message. Okay, that's why the idea, another good news or another message. Okay, but here's the thought that we want to keep in mind. The message doesn't necessarily have to be a religious message. Okay, think about how people felt when the theory of evolution was put on the table. To those people who wanted to discount the existence of the creator of the heavens and the earth, the theory of evolution, guess what that was? That was good news to them. That was good news. Same thing applies with any type of philosophy. So when we think about the mother of harlots and abomination, and see, when we think about harlots, in other words, these are other women. Because a woman is also a symbol for a church. And when we hear the word church, don't just focus on, religion. The word church basically means an assembly of people, a group of people. So the mother of other groups of people and abominations. And guess what keeps these people together? There's a saying, birds of a feather flock together, right? So there's a group of people who believe and adhere to the message of the theory of evolution. Okay? There's a group of people that adhere to and they all agree with any type of philosophical message. So they have different schools and they have different clubs and they have different organizations that come together because they share the same thoughts. In Galatians chapter 1, it says, I marvel that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Messiah to a different good news. Even during the time of the early assembly, people was already talking about something different. Think about that. And there isn't another good news, and there isn't another good news. Number one, there is no other message as pertinent as the message that we're bringing to you, that we're delivering to you. Only there are some who trouble you and want to pervert the good news of the Messiah. So now, this is what's happening. We talk about something being perverted. It's being made dirty. It's being changed in some way, shape, or form. It's being changed. Now let's take your mind back to that little horn. The one who would think to change times and laws. And I pray that Abba allows his spirit to put all this together for us so we can see the picture that he's been painting through his word since he had priests and prophets to put this word together for us. He says, verse 8, but even though we or an angel from the heavens shall preach to you any good news other than that which we preach to you, let him be cursed. As we have said before, so I now say again, if any man preaches to you any good news other than that which you received, let him be cursed. For am I now seeking the favor of men or of Elohim? And that's the question that every individual has to ask whenever they fall under these categories, religion, science, philosophy. Why is it that you're believing in this message or this person that you're following? Who are you trying to please? He says, or am I striving to please men? For if I was still pleasing men, I wouldn't be a servant of Messiah. Now, Paul's speaking on behalf of himself. But think about this. If we are not servants of the Messiah, you know what that teaches us? Let's look at it at the reverse of that. If we are not living our lives to be servants of Mashiach Yahushua, you know what that means? That we are living to please men. Now, we can look at it in the context of pleasing other men, or we can look at it in the context of pleasing ourselves, who are also men and women. Think about it. If we are not servants of the Most High by way of Yahushua HaMashiach, that's what we're telling him. Him being Abba. But let's move on. Now let's go back here. Let's take a trip back again when it comes to these different messages. Now, in Genesis chapter 4, verses 25 and 26, Adam knew his wife again. She gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, for Elohim has given me another child instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. A son was also born to Seth, and he named him Enosh. At that time, men began to call on Yahweh's name. Now, what's being said here at that time, men began to call on Yahweh's name? Well, you would think that, well, weren't they calling on the Creator's name all the way up to that point? Of course they were. Who else's name would they have been calling on? But why then, as Bible students, Bible believers, we have this question to ask, why then was this mentioned? Because at that time, something changed. Now it was necessary to acknowledge those who called on Yahweh's name versus those who called on something else. That's what happened. See? And this is mentioned again for a reason. Now let's add something else to it. To Helene one. Psalms chapter 96 and verse 5. It says, for all the gods of the peoples are idols. Now here's what we want to take from that. Excuse me. We don't just want to look at it, and I've said this numerous times, as an idol of wood or an idol of stone. The fact that it's an idol means that it's something that a human being fabricated themselves. Doesn't have to be a physical object that you actually bowing down before. Sometimes it can be a person. Sometimes it can be a thought or an idea. But it's something that we fabricate. And why is that significant? We're talking about human nature. Scripture says, again, the carnal mind or human nature is opposed to the Most High. Anything we fabricate based on human nature, 9 times out of 10, guess what it's going to be? It's going to be in opposition to the creator of the heavens and the earth. No matter how knowledgeable we may sound, no matter how wise we may sound, no matter how it may appear to some that we have understanding, it will be contrary to the creator of the heavens and the earth. So when it comes to an idol, do not limit an idol to just being that object you're bowing down before. It's our thoughts. It's our idea, speculative thought. See? Based on our logic and our reason, in spite of the fact that human nature is also deceptive nature. And I keep repeating these things because I want us to get it into our head who we are as individuals. The better we know and understand who we are, the more apt we would be to change. But what that old serpent wants to do, he wants to prevent us from seeing who we are and who we have become. All we got to do is look at the world. People want to blame the Most High for all of the evil and the atrocities. The reason why the evil and the atrocities take place is because we are not adhering to His word. If we adhere to His word, a lot of the ills in humanity wouldn't even exist. They only exist because we refuse to obey His voice. But anyway, Psalms 96 and verse 5 again. For all the gods of the peoples are idols, but Yahweh made the heavens. See? There's only one creator of the heavens and the earth. And that one creator of the heavens and the earth, you know what He gave to humanity? He gave the Torah. And He specifically gave it to a group of people, Israel. Not because these people were better than anybody else. That's not why. He made an agreement with somebody, and He promised them something, and He's keeping His word. That's why. Now let's go to 1 Kings chapter 18, and we're going to close out with this. 1 Kings chapter 18, I'm going to read through as much as I can without stopping, but I'm going to pinpoint some things. I will when we get through this so we can, we'll be done. So 1 Kings chapter 18, now this is referred to, I'm not going starting after verse 1 because, again, I want to get to the crux of the issue. This is what's referred to as the Battle of Mount Carmel. Okay? In verse 19, it sets it up. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel to Mount Carmel. Now, it's very important that we understand he is referring to Israel. Now look at what's going on among Israel. Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel to Mount Carmel, and 450 of the prophets of Baal, and 400 of the prophets of the Asherah. Listen to that. Who eat at Jezebel's table. Listen to that. This 450 and this 400 prophets of Baal, the masculine or the god of mythology. And then you have Asherah, the feminine or the goddess of mythology. It's 450 and 400, 850. Why? Because it points to the multiple gods and goddesses, or it points to the religions and the sciences and the philosophies. You see what I'm saying? This is what it points to. Abba is teaching us something by a historical event. This actually happened. And this is not Gentiles. This is Israel who are connected to Baal or Baal, if you will, and Asherah. And then it says this at the end, who eat at Jezebel's table. See, Jezebel became another symbol for this woman. Let's go to Revelation chapter 2. Listen to what it says. In verse 18. To the angel of the assembly of Thyatira, write, the son of Elohim, who has eyes like a flame of fire, and his feet are like burnished brass, says these things. I know your works, your love, faith, service, patient endurance, and that your last works are more than the first. But I have this against you, that you tolerate your woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess. She teaches and seduces my servants to commit sexual immorality and to eat things sacrificed to idols. In other words, Jezebel was a real person. Okay? This was a real woman. But the personification of evil is now attached to her name, as we see here in this passage. This woman, and don't just focus on Jezebel, look at it in the context of Sophia, or look at it in the context of Venus, or look at it in the context of Isis, or look at it in the context of Ashtoreth. You see the point? These different cultures, these different mythologies, they have different names for these gods and these goddesses, but in actuality, they're all one and the same. They come from the same source. And you know what that source is? Human nature. Sinful nature. Deceptive nature. All that old serpent does is make suggestions. We are so quick to jump on those suggestions that are being made because we have the sinfulness already in us. He knows that. He's the one that contributed to it being put there in the garden. He says, now let's go back. 1 Kings chapter 18, picking up in verse 20. It says, so Ahab, or Ahab, sent to all the sons of Israel and gathered the prophets together to Mount Carmel. Now, look at that. You got all these prophets, 850 prophets, and you only have Eliyahu. Verse 21. Elijah, or Eliyahu, came near to all the people and said, now this right here, this is a question for the entirety of humanity. It's being focused on Israel because Israel is again a microcosm of the entire world. Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you waver between the two sides? These are the two sides. Right here. Okay? These are the two sides. The seed of the serpent, seed of Elohim. He says, if Yahweh is the powers, Ha-Elohim, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. The people didn't say a word. Now, I'm going to add something to this. Let's interject something. Let's make a comparison. Look at what Yaakov or James said, chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. But if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of Elohim, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, without any doubting. Now see, here's where that old serpent comes in, because we have a word. And just like he did with Hawa in the garden, did God really say? That's all he got to ask. Did God really say this, or are these also options? So now he gave us a smorgasbord of thoughts and ideas, see, of messiahs and prophets, of religions or spiritualities, sciences, philosophy. He gave us a smorgasbord of it. Say, did God say this, or did he say this too? Isn't it possible that God also spoke to this person or to these people and established this way? That's the thought. He said, but let him ask in faith without any doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven by the wind and tossed. Now remember what we talked about, okay? Being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. And one of the reasons why he set some apostles and some prophets and some teachers, etc., to prevent that. Said, for the perfection of the saints. So when you have our order established, priest, prophet, spokesperson, whom he has trained, they are trained for the intent and purpose to prevent Israel from being tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. Listen to what's being said. Verse 6 again. But let him ask in faith without any doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven by the wind and tossed.